You dedicate 15 years to your family's legacy, build resorts, earn trust, and stay in the shadows. Then one meeting ends it all. A sister's betrayal. A stolen company. But what she didn't realize, you already owned the ground beneath her empire, and now it's time to make her kneel. My name is Marcus Alvarez. For 15 years, I'd been the operational cornerstone of Coastal Vista Resorts, our family's boutique hospitality collection. At 40, I wasn't pursuing prestigious titles or executive suites. I simply ensured our 7 properties along the Pacific Coast operated efficiently, that our employees felt respected, and that our guests returned year after year. Across the desk, my sister Elena stood with her arms folded. She'd been CEO of Coastal Vista for exactly 2 weeks, ever since our mother decided to transition to the chairperson role. Her first executive decision was apparently dispensing with me. The board agrees. We need fresh perspectives, she continued, watching as I emptied my desk drawer. We've hired a strategist from Hilton to manage your responsibilities. I nodded, maintaining a neutral expression. The board she referenced consisted of her, our mother, and 2 of her MBA classmates she'd appointed last week. My sister had always been the public face of the company, charming investors, presenting at hospitality conferences, claiming credit for our expansion. Meanwhile, I negotiated with vendors, supervised renovations, and cultivated relationships with staff. The unglamorous work that kept us profitable. You'll receive 8 months severance, she added, glancing at her smartwatch. Human Resources has prepared the documentation. I placed my personal photographs in a box, carefully protecting the framed image of our grandmother standing before our first resort in Monterey, the one Elena had never bothered to display in her office. Nothing to say? She prodded. Her immaculate blazer complemented her perfect manicure. Not a single hair out of place. I just smiled thinly. Good luck with the San Clemente renovation. Her eyes flashed with momentary uncertainty. The San Clemente property was our largest, and its renovation was behind schedule and exceeding budget, a challenge she'd now face without me. We'll manage perfectly well, she recovered. My strategist has transformed properties 3 times this size. I nodded again, collected my box, and departed without another word. 15 years of dedication. Dismissed in a 20-minute meeting. What Elena didn't know, or perhaps had forgotten in her rush for control, was that 4 years ago, our mother had pulled me aside with advice that altered everything. Never depend entirely on one venture, Marcus, she'd said. The hospitality business is in our blood. But property is where the true value resides. It was counsel I'd taken seriously, quietly making strategic moves while my sister accumulated accolades and titles. As I drove away from our corporate headquarters in San Diego, I wasn't concerned. I was patient, and patience would yield results when the lease renewals became due in just 3 months. I grew up watching my mother build Coastal Vista Resorts from a single struggling property in Monterey into a respected regional brand. While Elena shadowed her at industry gatherings and investor meetings, I preferred accompanying our maintenance staff through service corridors, learning how the operations actually functioned. By 17, I could diagnose a malfunctioning boiler system or negotiate with textile suppliers as effectively as any professional on staff. Your sister perceives the grand vision, my mother would say, not unkindly. You recognize the details that make it achievable. It was a complementary dynamic until it wasn't. As our mother aged, Elena's aspirations intensified. She began introducing consultants who produced polished presentations suggesting operational restructuring. She discussed international expansion, celebrity partnerships, and lifestyle branding. Sometimes I wondered if she even remembered we were fundamentally in the business of providing travelers with exceptional accommodations. For years ago, when our mother first mentioned stepping back, I recognized the implications. During a standard review of our financials, I noticed our 3 most successful properties, Monterey, La Jolla, and San Clemente, were all operating on land we leased rather than owned. The original landowners had been elderly when we signed 20-year leases decades earlier, and now their descendants were considering selling. It's a vulnerability, I told my mother over lunch at her preferred seafood restaurant. If someone purchases that land and increases our rates, we're constrained. She nodded thoughtfully. I've been intending to address that, but with the new property in Santa Barbara consuming our capital, I could acquire them, I said carefully. Personally, then lease back to Coastal Vista at identical rates. My mother studied me over her reading glasses. That would require substantial personal investment, Marcus. I've been accumulating savings, I replied simply, and I believe in our company's future. The following day, she connected me with our financial institution. 3 months later, I owned the land beneath our 3 flagship resorts. The company remained the tenant with a 4-year preferential lease agreement requiring renewal. Does Elena know about this arrangement? My mother had asked as we signed the documents. It's all properly documented in the corporate records, I said. But she doesn't examine those unless absolutely necessary. She smiled knowingly. Your sister sees the horizon. You see the foundation. Someday she'll understand how crucial that is. Now, driving home from my final day at Coastal Vista, I wondered if that day had finally arrived. I hadn't missed the subtle indicators over the past year. Elena excluded me from strategic planning, questioning my budget allocations, reassigning my most effective staff. The groundwork for my removal had been established long before today's conversation. The morning after being terminated, I awakened at my usual time, 5:45 a.m. For 15 years, I'd initiated my day reviewing overnight reports from our properties, addressing any concerns before they could escalate. Today, my phone remained silent. No emergencies. No complications to resolve. Just quietness. I prepared coffee and sat on my terrace overlooking San Diego Bay. The cruise ships moved silently across the water, consistent and methodical. I'd always appreciated their efficiency. No unnecessary movement, no requirement for recognition. Just the steady business of transporting value from one destination to another. My phone vibrated with a message from Rafael, our facilities director at the San Clemente property. Heard what happened. Their mistake. FYI, strategists are already implementing changes. Cutting expenses on the renovation. Not promising. I responded with a simple thanks but offered no guidance. Not my responsibility anymore. Another message arrived. This one from our mother. Breakfast at Marina Cafe, 8:30 a.m. Marina Cafe was a casual restaurant near our first corporate location. We hadn't dined there together in years. When I arrived, she was already seated in a corner booth, appearing older than I remembered. She acknowledged me as I sat down. She informed me afterward, she said without introduction. I would have approached it differently. But you didn't prevent it, I observed. Not a question. She sighed, stirring her coffee. Elena believes Coastal Vista needs to evolve, become more corporate, less family-oriented management. And you concur? I think. She paused, selecting her words deliberately, that your sister presents a vision for expansion that the board finds compelling. The server brought our regular orders without asking. Black coffee and sourdough toast for her. Vegetable omelet for me. Some aspects remained unchanged. The property, she said after the server departed. Elena doesn't fully comprehend the lease arrangements. I sliced my omelet precisely. The corporate documentation explains everything. You know she doesn't read the specifics. He gave me a pointed look. The renewal approaches soon. 3 months, I confirmed. I've already consulted with my attorney regarding terms. My mother set down her cup. What are you planning, Marcus? The question lingered between us. At that moment, I realized I'd been anticipating this conversation for years, preparing for it. Even the quiet, dependable son eventually acquires leverage over the favored daughter. I'd imagined satisfaction, vindication. Instead, I merely felt weary. Market-rate leases, I said finally. Nothing more, nothing less. She nodded slowly. That will substantially impact our operating expenses. Yes. I met her gaze. It will. We completed our breakfast in silence. As we stepped outside, she placed a hand on my shoulder. Your sister views business as a competition to win, she said. You've always seen it as a foundation to strengthen. Don't forget that distinction. I watched her walk away, her posture slightly diminished with age. For the first time, I perceived clearly what had been evident all along. This wasn't merely about Elena underestimating me. It concerned our mother enabling a division that had been expanding for decades. I returned home and entered my study. On the wall hung the original blueprints for our Monterey resort, framed when I purchased the land beneath it. Time to focus on foundations. 2 weeks following my dismissal, Elena finally called. I allowed it to reach voicemail, then listened to her carefully measured message. Marcus, we need to discuss the transition. Certain files are missing. Contact me. No apology. No acknowledgement that she'd terminated her brother after 15 years of service. Just business as usual. I deleted the message and spent the afternoon meeting with a former university colleague who'd become a commercial property developer. The next day, she appeared at my condominium. When I opened the door, she brushed past me into the living area. "You're ignoring me," she stated. "I'm respecting your decision to remove me from company matters." I remained standing while she sat uninvited on my sofa. "What files are missing?" "Supplier contracts, maintenance schedules, the complete renovation plans for San Clemente." She frowned. "And financial documents. There's a discrepancy in our property lease information." "Everything is in the shared drive," I replied, "organized by property and department. Just as always." "Well, your organization system isn't particularly intuitive." She crossed her legs, her designer heel tapping with irritation. "And your replacement needs context." I poured myself a coffee without offering her one. "My replacement is a hospitality strategist who's transformed properties 3 times our size. I'm confident he can navigate a filing system." Her eyes narrowed at hearing her own words reflected back to her. "This isn't constructive, Marcus. The company requires this information." "I don't work for the company anymore," I interrupted. "Remember?" Elena stood, smoothing her trousers. "Fine. I'll have legal formally request the documents." "Do what you must," I said, walking toward the door. Our conversation was concluded. A week later, a certified letter arrived from Coastal Vista's attorney requesting all documents pertaining to company operations. I forwarded it to my own counsel, who responded with a detailed inventory of everything already accessible on company servers and a courteous reminder that personal notes and materials were my property. Meanwhile, I began receiving calls from Coastal Vista employees. The new strategist was implementing efficiency measures, reducing staff hours, postponing maintenance, replacing established suppliers with cheaper alternatives. Morale was deteriorating. Guests were noticing. Rather than satisfied, I experienced a strange emptiness. These were individuals I'd worked alongside for years. Some I'd personally recruited. Their careers were being jeopardized by my sister's vision and my absence. Then came the email from our property insurance provider, requesting clarification on recent ownership changes affecting 3 key properties. Apparently, Elena had attempted to update the insurance policies and encountered the reality. The company didn't own the land beneath our most profitable resorts. I did. I forwarded the email to my attorney without responding. The following morning, my mother called. "Did you know?" Her voice was strained. "Elena doesn't examine legal documents?" "Yes." A heavy sigh. "She's convened an emergency board meeting. Claims you've concealed critical information from the company." "Nothing was concealed," I replied evenly. "Every lease agreement is properly documented. The company has been paying me rent for 4 years." "Paying you?" She sounded genuinely perplexed. "The accounting shows payments to MA Holdings." "MA Holdings. Marcus Alvarez Holdings." My sister has been approving financial statements for years without realizing she was authorizing payments to her own brother. "The board meeting is tomorrow," my mother continued. "You should attend." "I'm not on the board anymore," I reminded her. "Marcus." Her voice softened. "This remains our family business." After we disconnected, I sat at my desk, rotating my grandmother's old resort key between my fingers. The same key that accessed the first property my mother had transformed into a Coastal Vista family enterprise. Indeed, but families were supposed to protect each other. My attorney called an hour later. "Coastal Vista's legal team is requesting information about lease renewals. How do you wish to proceed?" I made my decision. "Send them the new terms. Market rate. No special considerations." The San Clemente resort stood 6 stories tall overlooking the Pacific coastline. Its expansive windows reflected the afternoon sunlight across the ocean. I personally supervised its transformation from a dated beach motel into one of our most distinctive properties. Now I sat in my vehicle across the street, observing guests enter through its doors, unaware of the corporate drama unfolding behind the scenes. My phone vibrated with a message from Patricia, my attorney. "They've received the new lease terms, anticipating a response today." I'd known the figures would shock them. The below-market rates I'd offered 4 years ago had saved Coastal Vista nearly $1.8 million annually across the 3 properties. The new terms would eliminate that advantage completely. As I watched, a familiar black Range Rover pulled into the reserved space near the entrance. Elena. She wasn't scheduled to be in San Clemente today. I reclined lower in my seat as she strode into the building, phone pressed to her ear, gesturing emphatically. Curiosity prevailed. I called Raphael. Your sister's on the warpath, he answered without greeting. Emergency inspection. Brought the new strategist too. What are they investigating? Property documents. Architectural plans. Mentioned something about structural assessment. He lowered his voice. Between us, I think they're attempting to challenge your ownership claim. After thanking him, I drove to the San Clemente County Records office. Using my laptop, I accessed the original deed transfers, property surveys, and lease agreements. All legally sound, all properly registered, as anticipated. What I didn't anticipate was what I discovered in the adjacent coastal development records. A permit application filed 18 months ago by Elena using her married name for a development authorization for an extensive commercial property on undeveloped beachfront land just south of San Clemente. I examined the business entity, Vista Horizon LLC, not Coastal Vista, a separate enterprise entirely, with my sister as the principal owner. Further investigation revealed similar permits near Monterey and La Jolla, all filed by the same LLC, all for competing resort developments. The realization struck profoundly. While I'd been faithfully managing our family's resorts, Elena had been orchestrating her own competing brand. She hadn't terminated me because she considered me incompetent. She'd removed me because I impeded her actual ambitions. I contacted Patricia immediately. I need you to investigate a company called Vista Horizon, LLC. 2 days later, we possessed the complete picture. Elena had been soliciting investors for her own luxury resort brand for nearly 3 years. Her business proposal, which Patricia had obtained through a connection, explicitly mentioned leveraging expertise and clientele developed at Coastal Vista and targeting identical markets where our most successful properties operated. The morning of the emergency board meeting, I received a call from an unexpected source. Lawrence Chin, one of Elena's business school colleagues who sat on our board. I've reviewed the lease renewal terms, he said without preamble. And I've heard speculation about Vista Horizon. Not merely speculation, I replied. A lengthy pause. I respected your mother. That's why I accepted this board position. Another pause. Elena assured us you were departing voluntarily, that you wished to explore alternative opportunities. Did she mention her own alternative opportunities? A weighted sigh. No. That's why I'm calling. The board meeting is at 1. I believe you should know that Elena intends to propose Coastal Vista divest the San Clemente, Monterey, and La Jolla properties. Claims the lease terms render them unprofitable. The final element aligned. She wanted Coastal Vista to sell the resorts so her new venture could acquire them at reduced prices, the buildings, not the land, creating a complex situation where her new enterprise would become my tenant. Thank you for informing me, I said. I didn't tell you anything, Lawrence replied and disconnected. I remained motionless, allowing cold clarity to permeate. This transcended business. This represented betrayal beyond what I'd imagined. Instead of attending the board meeting, I flew to San Francisco to meet with Diana Washington, CEO of Pacific Hospitality Group. We'd encountered each other at industry events previously, and she'd once attempted to recruit me. At the time, I declined out of loyalty to my family's business. Now that loyalty seemed misplaced. Interesting timing, Diana remarked as we settled in her corner office overlooking the bay. I heard Coastal Vista is considering divesting certain properties. Information circulated rapidly in the hospitality industry. 3 properties, I confirmed. Their most profitable ones. She leaned forward. And you happen to control the land beneath them? I nodded. A situation my sister failed to appreciate until recently. Diana's smile was purely professional. So what exactly are you suggesting, Marcus? A partnership. Pacific Hospitality acquires the buildings when Coastal Vista sells. I retain ownership of the land, but offer preferential lease terms to you. I presented a folder across her desk. Detailed financials, current operations, and my proposal. While Diana examined the documents, I gazed out at the bay. 15 years at Coastal Vista. And I'd never occupied an office with such a view. Elena had insisted the premium spaces were necessary for client meetings and her own office. Always the public face, always prominently positioned. These properties align with our expansion strategy, Diana said finally. But I'm curious. Why not simply increase the rent and compel your sister to continue operating them? Because she's already planning to launch a competing resort brand, I explained. One that would directly challenge Coastal Vista. Her eyebrows elevated. While still running Coastal Vista? That's ambitious. That's one description for it. I kept my voice neutral. I believe her strategy was to devalue these properties, have Coastal Vista sell them, then acquire them through her new venture at discounted prices, with me as her landlord. Diana laughed softly. Awkward. I prefer selecting my business partners more carefully. I met her gaze directly. Pacific Hospitality has a reputation for retaining personnel during acquisitions. That matters to me. Diana observed me for an extended moment. Family businesses are complicated, she said finally. This isn't about family anymore, I replied. It's about doing what's right for the people who establish these resorts. 2 days later, Pacific Hospitality's legal team began drafting acquisition proposals. Meanwhile, I contacted Raphael and other essential staff members at the 3 properties, discreetly informing them of potential changes and assuring them their positions would be secure. The news circulated faster than expected. A hospitality industry publication released an article speculating about Coastal Vista's financial challenges and Pacific Hospitality's interest in their prime locations. Elena's response was immediate, a company-wide email denying any plans to sell properties and reaffirming Coastal Vista's strong market position. Then my mother called, her voice exhausted. The board rejected her proposal to sell. Good, I said simply. She's furious. Claims you're undermining the company. She paused. She discovered your meetings with Pacific Hospitality. I remained silent. Marcus. She sighed. What are you attempting to accomplish here? The question lingered between us, more significant than she realized. What was I trying to accomplish? Retribution? Justice? Or something more fundamental? A reckoning long overdue. I'm protecting what I built, I answered finally, the same way you taught me. 3 weeks later, Coastal Vista's stock declined 14% following a quarterly report revealing decreasing revenue and increasing expenses. That same day, I received a formal request from the board, excluding Elena, for a meeting to discuss strategic alternatives for challenged properties. My attorney and Diana's team prepared for the meeting meticulously. When the day arrived, I entered Coastal Vista's conference room for the first time since my dismissal. Elena sat at the head of the table, expression tense with barely restrained anger. Our mother sat to her right, appearing every bit her 68 years. Board members occupied the remaining seats, their expressions carefully neutral. I took my position at the opposite end, opened my portfolio, and waited for them to initiate. Let's be transparent about what's occurring, Elena began, her voice clipped. My brother is attempting a hostile takeover of the company our mother established. Incorrect, I replied calmly. I'm simply exercising my rights as a property owner. Pacific Hospitality is interested in acquiring buildings Coastal Vista no longer wishes to maintain given the new lease terms. Lawrence Chin cleared his throat. The board never approved selling those properties. The board was presented with misleading information, I countered, distributing folders to each member. These documents demonstrate that while serving as CEO of Coastal Vista, Elena was simultaneously developing a competing resort brand targeting identical markets. The room went silent. My mother's complexion paled as she opened her folder. This is ridiculous, Elena protested. Vista Horizon is a consulting enterprise, not a resort development company. With development permits in 3 communities where Coastal Vista operates, I finished for her. With a business plan explicitly stating its intention to leverage expertise and clientele developed at Coastal Vista. Our mother turned to her, betrayal evident in her expression. Is this accurate? Her silence was sufficient. Pacific Hospitality's offer exceeds market value for the properties, I continued. It includes guarantees to retain all current staff and honor existing customer commitments. I paused, something her venture had no intention of doing. You've been planning this for years, she accused, voice unsteady. Acquiring the land. Waiting to execute your scheme. No, I corrected. I purchased the land to safeguard our family business. You're the one who decided I wasn't part of that family anymore. The board voted unanimously to accept Pacific Hospitality's offer, with one abstention, our mother, who remained motionless throughout the proceedings. As the meeting concluded, Elena departed without speaking. Lawrence approached me afterward. The board will be requesting Elena's resignation tomorrow, he said quietly. We'll require interim leadership while we restructure. I shook my head. That won't be me. I've made other arrangements. 1 year later, I stood on the rooftop terrace of the former San Clemente Resort, now the flagship of Pacific Hospitality's Southern California collection. The property had been renamed Oceana Resort, but much remained unchanged. Raphael still managed facilities. Most of the staff had remained, and guests still enjoyed the same coastal views that had made it exceptional. Diana joined me, presenting a quarterly report. Revenue increased 19% from the previous year. As consulting director for Pacific Hospitality's regional properties, I worked primarily behind the scenes, negotiating with vendors, mentoring staff, ensuring quality standards. No corner office, no formal attire, no boardroom politics. Just the work itself, which was all I'd ever wanted. Have you seen your mother? Diana asked carefully. I nodded. Monthly dinners. She's adapting to retirement. After the acquisition, she'd withdrawn from coastal Vista entirely. The company still operated 4 properties, though none performed as well as those Pacific Hospitality had acquired. And your sister? Vista Horizon filed for bankruptcy protection last month, I said without satisfaction or regret. Apparently, resort development requires more than ambition and an MBA. We stood in comfortable silence, watching surfers navigate the waves. Eventually, Diana departed for another meeting, and I remained alone with my thoughts. My phone vibrated with a message from my mother. Dinner tonight. Bringing the grandchildren. I smiled and confirmed. My niece and nephew weren't responsible for their mother's actions, and I'd ensured my relationship with them remained intact throughout the corporate upheaval. As the sun began its descent, I took a final look at the property. Not just the structure, but the land beneath it. The foundation that enabled everything else. In the end, that's what Elena had never comprehended. Success wasn't about who occupied the largest office or who possessed the most impressive title. It was about creating something solid enough to withstand any challenge. I turned from the view and headed downstairs. Time to prepare dinner with my family. The parts worth preserving, anyway.